nature lovers, and welcome back to Talking Naturally. This series is all about connecting with amazing people who dedicate their lives to studying and protecting the natural world. Today, I'm thrilled to have James Porteus joining us. James is a nature ranger with the National Trust who has kindly agreed to share some of his stories about his work and his love for the environment. So thanks so much for being here,
You're
James.
Welcome.
First off, I'd love to just hear a little bit about you. What got you started on this amazing journey into the natural world?
So I didn't have the most typical journey into nature conservation. I actually started, I did a maths degree at Durham, and after I graduated I moved to London with most of my friends, and I was looking for graduate jobs in finance, and yeah, I got a job in London, did that for a couple of years, and I just didn't really enjoy it that much. So my wife is from Northumberland, and after a couple of years of the two of us living in London together, we decided we wanted to move back north to be with her family. And that was a chance for me to look for something a bit different. So at that stage, I mean, I didn't really have any experience at all in conservation. All I really knew that I enjoyed was being outside. So when I was looking for jobs, that was the main criteria for me, was I wanted to be outdoors. So I applied for a seasonal job with the National Trust, and I had no expectations of getting it, but I was really lucky. I think that the hiring manager there used to work for Barclays Bank, and obviously saw a little bit of themselves in me, and gave me an opportunity. So yeah, I quit my job in London. For a seasonal 3-month contract with no future sort of employment prospects. It was a big risk, but it was one that I don't regret at all. So I started with the National Trust. I did a couple of seasonal contracts, starting out in seabird conservation in Northumberland on the Farne Islands and on the mainland as well with terns. I then went to Cornwall and did a residential volunteering position down there. And then, I've landed a full-time job as a ranger with the National Trust, based out of Low Newton by the Sea, which is the best job ever.
But did you happen to do any other sort of nature-related qualifications to do that, or has it all been very much on-the-job training?
All of my learning has been on the job. Like I say, I got really lucky. Somebody somewhere decided it was a good idea to take a bit of a punt with me. I haven't really got any qualifications as such. It's all been learning on the job.
So could you tell us a little bit more, in fact, about your current role and maybe what an average day looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I know it's a cliche, but there isn't really an average day.
It's a difficult question.
It is, yeah. But that is genuinely what makes the job exciting. So the National Trust looks after, it's 11 miles of coastline in Northumberland. So from Durridge Bay through to sort of sea houses, we've got 11 miles of interspersed coast. We also have the Farne Islands and Lindisfarne Castle. So it's such a big area, and also such a varied and diverse area. We've got loads of different habitats. So for example, we've got wetland and farmland, we've got dunes, woodland, all these different amazing places, and also, all the associated species that go with that. And it just keeps it so interesting. So, we're responsible for the sort of estate and land management, but also all the habitat management and species monitoring. So some days we'll be out with groups of volunteers doing, we could be coppicing, we could be doing woodland thinning, we could be creating tern habitat, or then in the summer we might be doing, breeding bird surveys or botanical monitoring. So there's all sorts, and it's just such a fantastic place to work.
Yeah, I imagine it changes throughout the year and throughout the seasons as well.
Yes, absolutely, which is another, I love that, seeing the changes of the seasons, and that's something that I've come to really appreciate. For example, the first skylark in the spring, or the first, the sort of twite, for example, in the winter on the salt marshes. It's something that's really amazing.
So what kind of species or environments out of those many that you just described have you focused on the most, or maybe are there any projects that you're working on at the moment that you're especially excited about?
So I think for me, my first role with the National Trust was in tern conservation, and every summer the National Trust protects an area of beach in Beadnell Bay called the Long Nanny Reserve, which is a breeding site for Arctic terns and little terns. And that is probably what excites me most about my job. So that is an annual project that we're involved in. So for anybody that doesn't know, the Long Nanny it's the largest mainland breeding colony of Arctic terns in the country. And it's also a nationally significant breeding colony for little terns. We've got about 2% of the national breeding population there. And obviously little terns are the second rarest breeding seabird in the UK. So that's something that's really exciting. And the work that we do there is, it's amazing. We get 6 seasonal rangers that come and help us with all of our monitoring and visitor engagement and protection work. We get numerous volunteers coming in as well. We can get to engage with so many people and really kind of share the stories of these birds. And it's just my favourite part of the job. It's a great place to be involved with.
So I'm curious, over the years, have you noticed any big changes in the landscapes or the wildlife that you've studied? I imagine there must be both highs and lows, maybe, in conservation work.
Well, the obvious one, I suppose, is thinking about the Long Nanny. As it's the largest mainland breeding colony of Arctic terns. The first year that I worked there, which was in 2018, we had about 2,800 nesting pairs, which was the highest that we've ever recorded at that site. This year, we had just over 1,000 breeding pairs. And actually, I was really excited this year. We thought just over 1,000 was a good number, sort of in the context of everything that the species have been through over the last few years. But that's just really stark decline, isn't it? And really kind of noticeable. And I mean, just earlier this year, Arctic terns were put on the Birds of Conservation Concern red list, which sort of demonstrates the plight that they're in at the moment. And it's not just the Long Nanny. The Farne Islands has seen a decline in Arctic terns as well. And they've got all these challenges that they're facing, whether it's recreational disturbance or habitat loss, climate change, which in fact impacts their food availability. And then, of course, disease is the big one. We've had a big avian flu, outbreak at the Long Nanny and at the Farne Islands and everywhere in the country over the last few years. But actually, it's not just avian flu. The Arctic tern colony at the Long Nanny also had an avian botulism outbreak in 2019. So, there's so many things that they're up against.
So many challenges.
But that's what makes the role so rewarding. You feel like you're doing something that's really genuinely important and worthwhile.
I know that a lot of people watching might want to get more involved in nature, whether it's even just learning to identify different animals and plants or making a bit of a difference in their local communities. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out?
Yeah, so well, firstly, I'd say, it's a fantastic thing to want to do, so to do it. I mean, like I've said, I had no experience really when I started, so don't let that put you off. If you're somebody who hasn't done much before, it doesn't matter. I think there's always, as a National Trust or other conservation organisations, we're always looking for people to come and help us, and all you really need is a passion. And don't worry, the knowledge can come later. I didn't know anything when I started the job really, and I learnt just by being around knowledgeable people. I went out with volunteers or rangers that have been in the job for a long time, and we did WEBS walks, so that's wetland bird walks, and I went out and did monitoring, and you just absorb knowledge. And there's, like I say, there's going to be so many opportunities. So find out, your local nature reserves, who runs them, what volunteer schemes there are, and just make contact. People are friendly. People want volunteers, so there'll be opportunities out there.
Do you have any memorable experiences from your work that perhaps really stand out? Maybe a funny or inspiring moment that you'll just never forget?
So I think from all of my work with the National Trust, the most memorable and sort of special time, it wasn't maybe one specific moment, but time, was when I worked on the Farne Islands. So I did a 9-month contract on the Farne Islands, which the whole 9 months was incredible. But particularly, I'll remember the sort of the late autumn months. So in the late autumn, the grey seals pup on the islands. And as part of the ranger team, we get to live out on the islands and monitor the population and the seal pups being born. And we spent time living out on Brownsman Island, which is in the outer group of islands. It's about 3 miles offshore. And there's so many seals. There's hundreds and hundreds of grey seals out there. And you just feel so far removed from the real world. We're only sort of 40, 50 miles away from where we're sat right now, but it feels a million miles from there. It's at that time of year, the days are short, so you've got the dark nights. You've got hundreds of seals, so you can hear them, you can smell them. We're in this tiny little lighthouse cottage, and some days the seals are literally, there's so many of them, they're coming right up to the door of the cottage, so you can't get out the front door. And we had to use the window in the sitting room to get in and out of the cottage. And you just feel like you're almost part of the seal colony there, and it was just such an amazing time, and I'd love to do that again. So yeah, I mean, seabirds are my real passion, but I do just remember that experience as being one of the most memorable.
Yeah, that sounds magical. So before we wrap up, I always like to ask, what is a perhaps more recent experience in nature that has brought you joy, big or small, and maybe reminded you why you do what it is that you do?
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky in my job that I get amazing wildlife experiences most days, to be honest. Or even if it's not a wildlife experience as such, I get amazing landscapes and views. But so every summer I go down to the Yorkshire coast to go whale watching, and we went down in September this year. And I always think this is amazing. So just off the North Yorkshire coast, you get a gathering of minke whales in the late summer, and it is one of the most amazing spectacles, I think, in this country that you can get. And it's so close. So we went down and we saw probably 30 or 40 minke whales.
Wow.
And, it just reminds me, the marine environment obviously is so important in the line of work that I'm in with breeding seabirds. And I love going down there and seeing, obviously, I say a healthy marine environment. Of course, there's still issues, but seeing all these animals coming together in such an amazing spectacle, and it just gives you a bit of hope. And it really inspires me then to come back and work really hard to protect the marine environment and to do the job that I'm doing.
Preserve it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, James, for sharing your stories and your knowledge today. It's been a treat to chat with you. And thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and maybe even leave a comment about your own favourite nature experience. I'm Rachel, and this has been Talking Naturally. See you next time. Bye.